Stephen? Are you guys able to hear me okay? Yes? Okay. Well, I guess we can go ahead and start. It's a little bit early, but we can start with the prayer requests anyway. Maddie is one I'd like to put on the list this morning. She had well, both of us had the second COVID shot Friday, and she didn't fare too well with it. She's got kind of sick. I didn't have any reaction, so it goes all the way from no reaction to throwing up sick. I'm sorry? I'm not sure which one we had, but we had it at Publix, whichever one they're doing. Moderna? Okay. Did you have any reaction? Well, I got so many ailments from Parkinson's. I don't recognize anything new. So I was fortunate, I guess. What else do we need to pray for? Our country, of course. Okay. Wow, is she a young person? Yeah, that's a lot of stress on her too. Anybody else? Bob. Yeah, Bob. Is he still at home? Yeah, Kathy's probably with him, right? Well, this is just a figure of speech for some people, but maybe. But not for her. She wouldn't say that normally, huh? She didn't hear from the. Not yet, but they think she's going to go sometime next week. Maddie's friend, Judy. George, how's your wife?
She had a rough night last night. She's getting on.
I think we need to keep Pastor Mark and Susie in our prayers too. They're about to make a move to North Carolina. It'll be kind of a new chapter in their life. I think they're supposed to Monday, tomorrow. Well, I told him maybe it's a blessing that it's taken so long because it'll be a little warmer up there than it would have been 2 months ago. Who is that? Well, I got 3 hours sleep last night, which is a pretty good night for me. So if you see me nodding off up here, you know what happened. All right, Butch, anytime. Amen. Well, we're going to do hopefully chapters 49 and 50 of Genesis today and wind up the study of Genesis. And then I'd like to go into one of Paul's letters, maybe 1 Corinthians, starting next week. This chapter 49 and 50, you can look at any of these chapters in the Bible and you can find a sort of a general theme that goes through that chapter, or something that's emphasized. And of course, this is the end of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the beginning of what we call the Jewish nation, the children of Israel. And so this is about that, but it's also about faith. Do you remember the faith chapter in the Bible that we call it? We kind of have nicknamed it the faith chapter. You remember where that is? Hebrews chapter 11. Okay, good memory. Hebrews chapter 11. We'll get into that a little bit later today, but the theme here is about faith. The faith in this case is the faith that God has promised them through the Abrahamic covenant that they will have a place of their own, a land of their own, the land of Canaan. And even though they're down in Egypt now, they have faith that eventually God will take them back to the land of Canaan. And he will in a great way, too. It'll be several hundred years, but the 80 people that came into Egypt will have grown to maybe 2 million by that time. So the children of Israel will be a real nation. Okay, in the last chapter, dying Jacob met and blessed Joseph's sons. Remember that? And then he switched who he blessed. He blessed the younger. Now the rest of Jacob's sons are before him for his farewell message to each of them. So he's in his bed, on his deathbed, and all these 12 sons come in and gather around. And so he's going to have a word of wisdom for each one of them. His faith is evidenced in his contention that the children of Israel would dwell in Canaan rather than comfortably stay in Egypt. By comfortably stay in Egypt, it means that they have a good place there, don't they? They have the most choice land, and they have the favor of the Pharaoh. They're going to be really the favorite people of the Pharaoh in that land, even though they're foreigners. So it would be very easy to comfortably stay in Egypt, but they have the faith that they're going back to Canaan. So let's start with 49, 1 and 2. Butch, you want to read those two verses?
Then Jacob called for his sons and said, gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Assemble and listen, son of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel.
Okay, so he begins with the oldest son, Reuben, and goes to the youngest son, Benjamin. So he takes them in a numerical order there, or order of the oldest to the youngest. Okay, 3 and 4. Mike?
3 and 4?
Yeah.
Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength. Excelling in honor, excelling in power, turbid as the waters, you will no longer excel. For you went up unto your father's bed, and to my couch defiled.
Okay, that's back in chapter 35. We're told that Reuben goes into one of his father's concubine. And so, of course, Jacob finds out about that. So Reuben is in trouble there. And he says Reuben is unstable. He won't amount to very much. Betty, 5 through 7.
Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitation. O my soul, come now thou into their secret, into their assembly. Mine honor be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their sepulchre they dig down a wall. Cursed be your anger, for it is fierce, and the wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel.
Okay, so the next two brothers are full brothers. They're Leah's sons, Simeon and Levi. And although Levi will become the tribe of the priests in the future, this Levi, the beginning of this, is kind of a bad dude. They murdered an entire village in retribution for their sister Dinah being raped by a villager. If you remember the story, Dinah was taken by this young ruler's son, and he wanted to marry her. He was really taken with her, but he raped her. And his dad comes to Jacob and wants to have a swap of young women to each tribe. In other words, among the tribes, he wants to swap. And these two find out about what happened, and so they make a plot to go and kill the whole village. So what they did, they made the villagers, or they encouraged the villagers to accept the notion of being what's the term when you're circumcised? There you go. Now, I don't know about you, but if a grown man is circumcised, that's going to sort of put him out of commission for a few days, didn't it? I mean, that would be a very painful thing to happen to you. And so he's got the whole village being circumcised, and so they're pretty much out of commission. And while they're in that state, these two brothers go in and they hack up the whole village. They killed everybody. So they really brought some dishonor down on themselves. Okay, the next 8 through 12, George.
Judah, your brothers will praise you. You will grasp your enemies by the neck. All your relatives will bow before you. Judah, my son, is a young lion that has finished eating its prey. Like a lion crouches and lies down. Like a lioness who dares to arouse me. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from his descendants, until the coming of the one to whom it belongs, the one whom all nations will honor.
Okay, in the KJV, that one is called Shiloh, right? Okay, now,
You're talking about the coming ruler?
yes, right. The let's see, where is that? Verse 10, yeah, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor get lawgiver between his feet until Shiloh come. Now this Shiloh, if you remember in the Jewish language, in Hebrew, they assign a numerical value to letters or to words. And the Shiloh word has the same numerical value as Moshe, which is the Hebrew for Moses, and also for Mashiach, which is the Hebrew word for Messiah. Okay? And so you can sort of take your pick there. Shiloh is either Moses or it's the Messiah. The Messiah, of course, being Jesus, which they didn't recognize. But Judah is to be blessed, and Judah is, if you remember, he's a leader of the brothers. He's not the oldest, but he's the leader. Because remember when they took Joseph and were going to sell him, or were going to kill him, actually. Judah saved his life by saying, why don't we just sell him instead of killing him? So he saved him that way. And when they came back down and found out that Joseph was the benefactor in Egypt, Judah offered to take Benjamin's place when Benjamin was accused. You know, Joseph set up Benjamin by putting a silver cup into his bag, and so he set them up to see what was going to happen. He wanted to find out how the brothers would respond to that, whether they would abandon Benjamin as they had him, or whether they would take up for Benjamin. Well, Judah offered himself in the place of Benjamin, didn't he? So Judah's the line through which we find Jesus being born. And so Judah is mentioned many times further along in the Bible. Okay, the next 13 through 15. Okay, so he didn't have a lot to say about these brothers, but except where they're going to settle in the north. Zebulun along the coast, and Issachar, who were known as hard workers, would be settling in the north also. Okay, 16 through 21. Okay, so Dan is going to be sort of a snake in the grass, he's saying here. Gad, Asher, and Naphtali were lesser known tribes, and so he didn't have a lot to say about any of them, did he? All right, now he gets to Joseph, 22 through 26. Through 26. So the sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, became prominent tribes, and of course Joseph was their benefactor. He was the savior at that time, that point in time. Okay, 27 through 29.
Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he divides the plunder. All these are 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving them each blessing appropriate to him.
29.
Then he gave them these instructions. I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave of the field of Ephron, the Hittite, the cave in the field of Mel, Achlah, and Marmor and Canaan, which Abraham brought as a burial place from Ephron, the Hittite, along with the field.
Okay.
Abraham.
Okay, that's good. All right, now this could be thought of as a prophecy of Saul of Tarsus, could it not? The way he described Benjamin. Benjamin was a ravenous as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. Okay, this was Saul of Tarsus before he was converted on the road to Damascus, right? Go over to Philippians for just a minute. Let's read 3:5 and see how that looks like a picture of Benjamin there. Philippians 3:5. Dale, would you read that when you get there? Now, what's happening here is that Paul is telling the people that don't believe that he's should be an apostle, that he's deserving of being an apostle, and here's why.
Circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, in regard to the law of the Pharisees.
Go ahead and read a couple more there.
As for zeal, persecuting the church, as for legalistic righteousness, faultless. But whatever was to my profit, I consider loss for the sake of Christ.
Okay, so he was a bad dude, wasn't he? And when he was Saul of Tarsus. All right, 30 through 33 on back to Genesis 49. Okay, so Jacob makes his burial wishes known, a man of the flesh who dies in faith. Now this burial place that he's talking about in Mamre is about 13 miles from Bethlehem, and I got the two mixed up. In the next chapter, I'll show you where I made a mistake in the notes here. But the two places, in other words, where he buried Rachel. Remember, Rachel was his favorite wife, right? Was a different place than where Leah was buried, along with Abraham, Isaac, and both of their wives. And so, but the places are only 13 miles apart. So they're, for all practical purposes, as far as their location in Egypt is concerned, they're the same place because they're very close together. Bethlehem, if you've ever been to Israel, is only about 5 miles south of Jerusalem, and Mamre is I can't remember the name of the city, but it's Hebron. Yeah, it's near Hebron, and it's only about 13 miles to the northwest, away from Bethlehem. All right, let's turn over to the other side of your notes and get into chapter 50 here. Now, it was 1715 BC, according to my King James Version, when Joseph first stood before Pharaoh as his vice Pharaoh at 30 years old. This is, if you want to look it up, is in Genesis 41, verse 46. And it was 1689 BC when Jacob is buried. So the difference between those two dates is 26 years. So that would make Joseph 30 plus 26, or 56 years old at the death of his father. And Joseph died at 110 years old, so he lived 54 more years as a vice pharaoh after the death of Jacob, just to go through a little bit of math there. All right, 51 through 5. Let's start back over here with Butch. Okay, so Joseph asked permission of Pharaoh to bury his father, Jacob, in Canaan. And what happens? Mike? Read 6 through 9 there. Yep.
And Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury thy father according as he made thee swear." And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the house of Joseph and his brethren, and his father's house, all their little ones, and their family, their flock, and their herds, they left in the land of Goshen.
Okay, so this was a large funeral procession from Goshen up to Bethlehem or to Hebron, whichever you want to say. I'm sure they visited both places, but they put old Jacob in the tomb in Hebron, not in Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem, like I said here. The next section says Jacob was buried alongside his beloved Rachel, but he wasn't. He was buried alongside Leah, along with Abraham, Isaac, and their two wives near Hebron. Okay, 10 through 13 there.
And they came to the threshing floor of Agag, which is beyond Jordan, and there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land, Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Agag, they said, "This is the grievous mourning of the Egyptians." Wherefore the name of it was called Abel Mizpah, which is beyond Jordan. And his sons did unto him according as he commanded them.
Yeah.
For his sons carried him into the land of Canaan, and they buried him in the cave of the field of Macpelah, which Abraham had bought with steel, for possession of the burying place of Ephraim the Hittite before Mamre.
Okay, so he was buried in that cave with the other patriarchs, right? Rather than with Rachel. All right, 14 through 18.
After burying Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's burial. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became fearful. Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back for all the wrong we did to him, it says.
Yes, through 18.
So they sent this message to Joseph. Before your father died, he instructed us to say to you, please forgive your brothers for the great wrong they did to you, for their sin in treating you so cruelly. So we, the servants of the God of your father, beg you to forgive our sin. When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. Look, we are your slaves, they said.
Okay, why do you think these brothers were so fearful of Joseph? It was a guilt-ridden thing, wasn't it? Yeah, they were guilty, and they knew it. Yeah, they've been running scared. They figured that the only thing that was keeping them from Joseph's wrath was their father, Jacob. Now that he's gone, there's nothing to hold Joseph back. But they misread Joseph, didn't they? Okay, 19 through 22. Okay, Joseph lives 54 more years then as the vice Pharaoh. Now eventually, what happens to the favored position of the children of Israel? That's right. A new Pharaoh rises up. Now this Pharaoh that was there when Joseph was the vice Pharaoh was a man from really outside of Egypt, wasn't he? He was a Semite, and so the children of Israel, as being Semites also, found favor with him. They were sort of brothers under the skin. But the new Pharaoh would be a Hamite. Remember the difference between a Shemite and a Hamite? Sons of Shem or sons of Ham. Noah's sons. The Hamites were the folks of Africa, and the Shemites were the usually Middle Eastern folks. So they didn't particularly like each other in some cases. So when this new Pharaoh came into power, then the children of Israel were really slaves, and this is what was happening when they had the Exodus. Okay, the next section. Yeah. Right.
Thinking about erasing the history of the previous time. And that seemed, to me, personally, it seems like
That's exactly what's happening today.
trying to erase our history of who we really are and how we came to be who we are.
Absolutely, they are, and they want to do that. Well, it's part of Satan's plot to erase God from our national psyche, really. And they're not God followers, this new bunch. So it's a scary time for us too, like it would have been back then for the children of Israel. All right, 23 through 26. Okay, now Joseph prophesies that God will return the children of Israel to Israel, or to the promised land, and asks that his bones return when they return. So he knows they're going to return, and he asks them to do that, to return his bones to Canaan. So the book of Genesis ends there, and it began with God creating the heaven and the earth, and ends with 2,300 years later with a coffin in Egypt. Joseph was not taken to Canaan at the time of his death because he was a hero of Egypt. The Egyptian people would not have allowed that to happen. They wouldn't have allowed his body to be taken out of Egypt. But Joseph tells the children of Israel to take his bones when God returns them to the land of promise. The book of Hebrews says this faith is the salvation of Joseph. In other words, his faith that he would be returned to the land was his salvation. Let's turn over to Hebrews 11 and look at that for a minute. The faith chapter of the Bible. Now, the first thing we want to do is know what faith means. It seems like a simple concept, but it's really a pretty complicated thing. Somebody want to read 11:1? Yeah. Just the first verse to start with.
Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see.
Okay, so faith is something we don't know that's going to happen, but we have faith that it will, right? Somebody said it's taking God at his word. If we read the Bible, which is God's word, and we believe it, that's faith, isn't it? Because we're taking God at his word. Now, if we don't believe it, what's that saying about God? That we don't believe God. Okay, so that's the opposite of faith, isn't it? And there's a commentary in my Bible. Let me read this to you. It says faith has two sides. One side has to do with the intellect. It's an intellectual conviction that Jesus Christ is God. Okay? And certainly we can find verses in the Bible that hold up, that tell us that that's true. All right, the other side has to do with the will. It is a volitional surrender of the will to Jesus Christ as master. Okay, so this is the second part of faith. It's not just a belief, but it's also a volitional part, or willful part on our part, that we give ourselves over as servants to this God. Just to show you a couple of places, go to Colossians for just a minute. And we'll start with verse 14. Now, Paul is talking here to the Colossians about go back to 13, verse 13. Chapter 1, verse 13, Colossians. Now he's talking about Jesus here. He who hath delivered us from the power of darkness and hath translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son. All right, the kingdom of his dear Son. This is, of course, it's talking about God the Father. The kingdom of his dear Son is heaven, in whom we have redemption through his blood. Talking about Jesus, right? Even the forgiveness of sins, who is the image, and you might say the human image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. For by him, talking about Jesus, were all things created that are in heaven, that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. So this is saying that Jesus, or God the Son, the second member of the Trinity, was the power that actually did the creation of the world, of the earth, of everything in the universe. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. In other words, the very atoms that make up the material that we are made of, that our world is made up of, this table is made of, everything is consisting because Jesus is allowing it to consist. In other words, he's holding the atoms together to make the things that are here remain. Go to Ephesians 3:9 for just a minute, just a few pages backward. Ephesians 3:9. Somebody want to read that one? Yeah.
And to make plain to everyone the ministration of this mystery, which for the ages past was kept hidden in God, who created all things.
By your version doesn't have the rest of that. By Jesus Christ, created all things by Jesus Christ. And if yours leaves that out, I think I would toss it. Yeah, there's some left out stuff in some of these newest versions. So that's the problem with some of the newer versions. Go to John. Well, let's see. Go to Titus first. Titus 2:13, just for a minute. This is all part of faith. Titus 2:13. Titus is with all the T books there. Timothy and Thessalonians and Titus. Titus is the last one of that bunch. Just before Hebrews. (2:13). Somebody got that? All right.
Looking for that blessed hope, the Lord's appearing of the great God and our Savior, Jesus Christ.
The great God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Does that leave any doubt that Jesus is God? Okay, go back to Hebrews now. To the right just a little bit, back to Hebrews 11. And what got us into this was we said the book of Hebrews 11:22 says this faith is the salvation of Joseph. So someone read 11:22 in Hebrews.
By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his life.
Okay. And so if you read all of chapter 11 here, it's got by faith many, many times. By faith, Enoch was translated, didn't see death. By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not yet seen, moved with preparing the ark. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out to a place he'd never been, did so. By faith, Sarah herself received strength that she was going to conceive a child at 90, and so on. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph, and so on. So in each case here, these old patriarchs or their wives did something by faith. In other words, they they had two sides. They did it by an act of intellect, and they said in their mind, in their brains, that it was going to happen. But also they subjected themselves to God, didn't they? And that's what we do when we have faith. Okay, do you have the faith of Joseph that God will take your bones to our promised land? Where's our promised land? Heaven, right? Maybe not our bones, but he's going to take the spirit, the whole body. Yeah. In other words, we're going to get one of those glorified bodies, aren't we? And I'm hoping that happens before I die. I'd love to see that. Well, I'd still like to have some of my faculties about me. So I don't know. I'm getting fast going the wrong way on that score. So it has to happen pretty soon. All right. Anyway, it's something to think about. Will Jesus say to you, "Well done, good and faithful servant," when you ultimately meet him? I hope so. I do too. And that's something to work for, isn't it? Every day. Betty, would you dismiss us in prayer, please? Amen.
Did a quick search. By faith appears 21 times.
21 times.
Starting out in Acts, all the way to
Thank you.